Wow, check out that harvest. Imagine if I was growing more of this stuff. This was only off a few cassava plants. Now that bountiful harvest came from this plant right here. This is called cassava or tapioca or manioc in other places. Whew, it's trying to get closer. And you know what? This plant is a wonderful plant to have in your garden because it provides a perennial starch crop that can keep your family fed. And today I'm going to show you how I harvest this plant, how I propagate this plant, and how I grow this plant so that my family always has starchy food to put on the table. Now come along and join with me today as I share with you tips on how to grow this amazing plant. So today we're going to start this video off with harvesting the cassava. This cassava has been sitting in my garden bed for over 2 years, and it's time to get it pulled out. Cassava is typically ready to harvest after 9 months, but it could stay in the ground for as much as 2 years, acting as sort of like a storage system for your roots. Because once you harvest these roots, they gotta be used pretty quickly, unless you plan on preserving the roots by freezing them or turning them into flour. Now, to harvest cassava, make sure all the weeds are out of the way. And when you actually go down to dig out the roots, you gotta be careful because it's pretty easy to damage them. I just go ahead and stick a shovel in there and pry them out with my shovel, gently teasing them out as I go. And sometimes I pierce a root or two, but that's okay because I pretty much use them a day or two after harvest. If you want to be a little more careful, you can get in there like you're a paleontologist looking for dinosaur bones and carefully excavate the roots out that way. Whatever's your style, it's up to you. Whew. Harvesting is no easy job, but we did it. We got all that cassava that was in that bed behind me. And you saw how much there was. There really wasn't that much, but we got a pretty decent harvest out of it. This cassava will last a pretty good time. We're going to get those roots into the kitchen and get them processed. But in the meantime, we got to prepare some new beds and make some plant cuttings so that we can propagate new plants. With all your leftover cassava branches, we can take cuttings from these and start up new plants. But you want to be sure you take it from the right part of the branch. You don't want to have any green wood, like right here. This stuff just will die off and never take root. And the same with wood, that it just looks a little too old. Even though this wood sprouted up this sprout here, in order to try and reroot it again, might be a little tougher than just using this piece here. So anywhere from the size of your pinky to up to your thumb for the size of a cassava cutting. And you want to be sure when you make your cuts that you know which side is the bottom and which side is the top. So I like to make my cut flat and straight, just underneath a node right here. I'll just cut a straight cut like that, and then go up about 10 to 12 inches and make an angled cut. You can see there, angled cut. I know that's the top, and then the bottom is nice and flat. I know that's the bottom. This is a perfect size cassava cutting that we could stick in the ground. We want to have a few nodes underneath the soil level. So let's make up a few more and we'll stick them in. Cassava needs a little soil to grow out its roots, but it doesn't have to be good soil. But I do like to add a bag of compost just to add a little bit of fertility to what I have. After that, I'll let the bed sit for a couple weeks while the chickens get a chance to come in and mix it all up. Okay, it's been about a week and a half. These cassava cuttings have been sitting in a bucket of water. It finally started to rain. The chickens mixed in our compost into our bed, and it's time for us to get our cassava cuttings into the soil. Now, before we get to planting these guys, you have to know that cassava thrives in the tropics. Any sign of frost and these guys will die instantly. So be sure that you live in a warm climate before planting cassava. I'm going to show you 3 different ways to plant these cuttings into the ground. So let's check them out. The first technique is just sticking each cutting straight into the ground at least 1 node deep. I like to plant 3 cuttings at a time just to ensure that they all take root. And if all 3 of them do, I'll pull out 2 and leave 1 to continue growing. With this next method, you just dig a furrow in the soil and plant your cassava cuttings in horizontally, and then just bury them up completely. And a lot of people swear by using this last method, which is by sticking them diagonally into the ground. They believe that helps with better root development. And like I said, as soon as we know which ones are growing, we're going to pull out the weaker ones and save the best. And here we are 1 month later. The cassava is starting to grow, but the bed could use some mulch. It's always good to keep that soil covered. And at this point in time, we could go ahead and cut out the 2 least performing cuttings of the bunch. And in a couple months, your cassava will look like this. And in just 9 short months from planting, you'll have cassava ready to harvest all over again. Well, that's it for growing cassava, everybody. If you live in the tropics and you have a little bit of soil, that's pretty much all there is to it. But if you want to learn how to process what you harvest and how to cook with it, you're going to want to check out this video right here. I got a special guest coming to teach us how to cook this special crop, so you're not going to want to miss it. All right, everybody, till next time, a hui ho.